So to put this into context, I'm talking in an ELT private academy, and young learners that I have been teaching this year between the ages of 8 and 12. And the reason why book clubs, well, I'm a storytelling English teacher, and I think the storytelling comes first. I'm from the Glens of Antrim with some pretty cool stories. So first off, just to set the scene and then talk about what Washback is. So it's 2020, 2021. Does anybody really know what year it is? Because I don't anymore. There's no TPR in the classes. There's no projects together with students. There's no games. We can't do a lot. Basically, everybody has to sit 150 centimeters away from everybody. Everybody has a mask on their face. You can't see smiles. And on top of that, we have exams, which the kids have to work towards, which is what backwash is. So basically, there's a lot of pressure from a very young age, like 8-year-olds sitting exams. Why? Which asks the question, where's the crack in classes in 2020 and 2021? Basically, just to set the scene right now, and I'm saying right now because it might change on Monday. I see my students twice a week. One of my classes are face-to-face with social distancing and masks and cleaning and visors and stuff. The other class is online on Zoom the second half of the week. So what is Washback? So a bit of the academic background. So Washback is the effects of testing and teaching on learning and classroom materials. Both of these terms and phrases can be used interchangeably. One of them is a lot more disgusting sounding than the other. Backwash, no thanks. The academic literature says it can basically be beneficial or harmful depending on the teacher. The academic research basically says it's more negative than not. It can dominate all teaching and learning. It can dominate your learning activities. Some research says it's seen as harmful. Some research says that isn't always the case. Others argue that it is effective for curriculum. It's effective for the teacher. Then it's down to the teacher to decide on the best classroom practice or to promote positive washback. So the pressure is on the teacher and not the exam. But generally, overall, from the academic literature, it is seen as teachers are being forced to cover exam skills as opposed to the language that we're actually trained for. There's a lot of debate on whether it's good or bad. Personally, I've worked in good academies where the washback is hard to even notice because the curriculum and the final end of year external exams, you don't really notice how, when using coursebook material and other material, it doesn't look like you're practicing for exams. Whereas in other academies, for example, the aim of every class has been to cover 2 or 3 points of an external exam. So what was the idea? Basically, the idea was, this started from me storytelling in class. After all, I am a storyteller. So my students originally, because they were so interested in mythology and stories of Ireland, they would get a choice of what story they wanted to hear at the end of class every day. Which I found this was quite useful to introduce, say, grammar points of certain things we were studying. For example, the Finn McCool stories are fantastic because they're really good for studying comparatives and superlatives, and you can make classes entirely based on that because, you know, he is the greatest warrior we've ever had, but there are bigger giants and smaller giants and that kind of thing. So over the course of the year, I got them telling or retelling stories from different perspectives, which is always quite a useful storytelling technique anyway. But then I thought, well, why don't we use some graded readers? Because basically these graded readers were collecting dust in the staff room anyway, and weren't part of any syllabus. So I lifted a few that were, as an experiment, I lifted Tom Sawyer and give this out to the kids, obviously level appropriate and graded to a young level or a young learner level. But the most important thing was this was for extensive reading. I didn't want them to write 60 words in their vocabulary book at the end of class. I wanted them to read it cover to cover. They're young learners. They're doing this in a second language. I wanted them to enjoy it. It's as simple as that. There's a lot of things we can't clash because of else is going on. But the number one thing is it's for the crack. It's not another textbook. It got them out of their textbook. It got them out of their workbook. And this was seen as just a enjoyable add-on to have fun with in class. So this how it was carried out. This was entirely student controlled. So what I did was I never treated any of this as a formal homework. This is always done in the student's own time. Basically, if I give them, I would tell them to read one chapter for the next class. One chapter could have been 2 pages, whereas you'll come back and you'll have you'll have students who have read the entire thing cover to cover. So the most important thing was this was entirely in their own time that they did it. Normally, I do subscribe to the Jim Scrivener Demand High classroom, but with these extra added book clubs, I got them to, it was actually demand low on my part. They were giving so much back to me week in, week out. It was unbelievable. I took it very relaxed. The pace was their pace, whatever they wanted to do. If somebody couldn't read the book for 2 weeks because other things were happening or they were in isolation, that's perfectly fine. The number one thing is they enjoyed it. So what I did in the face-to-face classes for the first 30 minutes of each class when we were introducing a new book. So we've done quite a few books. The first time we see this new book, we do, maybe there's movie trailers. So for example, the Pirates of the Caribbean graded reader they've just got, we had movie trailers. They were talking about the movies. And then it was like, oh, by the way, here's your new book. Then we would read the introduction and the first chapter all together. So there's a shared experience that everybody has. And then every other class after that, there's a 15-minute opening section of the class is talking about the books. Obviously, I had pre-planned questions about, say, chapter 2 or 3 or 4 in each class. Every single student came back to me with more done than I expected. But not only that, they'd come back to me with, they'd finished the first Tom Sawyer book in one day, every one of them, 12 students, which was unbelievable. It was very good for the activities we could do. So there's grammar point in the syllabus, instead of getting them to do it in the book where you take out a grammar point and you study it individually, here it is in graded readers. So it's not genuine English, but it's as close as they're going to get at A1 and A2 level. There was revision points. We were able to revise different points they would have done in the past to sort of refresh. For example, the past simple, put this in the irregular verbs, put this into, tell me the story again from a different perspective using these different verbs. They seen this as gamified as opposed to actual activities like you would get in the workbook. For example, I used to get them doing 5 points on what a character could have, should have, or would have done. There's grammar points. They didn't even realize they're doing it. Tom Sawyer is now 50. How would he read the story? Where is he now? What's happening? Or tell it from other character perspectives. The kids absolutely loved retelling Tom Sawyer from Injun Joe's perspective because he murdered the guy and he got caught in the end and lived in a cave. So I kept this very, very unclassroom-like as humanly possible. It was informal. It was for the crack. I didn't chastise anybody who hadn't read the book or hadn't finished it. I had some students who they hadn't been able to read it in 2 weeks. If they're in hospital or 2 weeks, there's a pandemic going on. Let's be honest here. And then I would specifically have one-to-one conversations with each student about what they thought of the book. Have they been enjoying it? What are the characters saying to them? I wanted to make it personal to absolutely everyone in the room. Now, I did only have 12 students per class, so it was very easy to do. If you have a bigger class, I'm not sure how that would work. But I made sure it was very personal to every single student. And the feedback was they were absolutely mad for it. I genuinely didn't expect this to be as successful as it was. But because they have a new toy in a new book in a year, let's be honest, is quite difficult. I'm genuinely surprised at how positive this has been. I've kept it as a shared experience for everyone. So it's very important that we all share the same experience, and therefore there's like a team effort to go through every book. We've gone through quite a few now. The introductions of new books have been incredibly popular. I wish I'd been doing this for years, to be honest, because the kids have absolutely loved having something else that isn't the textbook, and they've got a homework, and some of the books have a CD so they can listen to it. There's the pronunciation they can listen to and practice as well. So the feedback has just been unbelievable. So what are the benefits that I've got out of the students have got out of this? Well, the graded books, granted, it's not natural language, it's graded, but natural language. It's so much more natural than what is in the course book that they're ever going to do. And the course books are always very start with grammar points, whereas here it's just all right there. Speaking of the course book, it isn't the course book. You can have as much fun in the course book, but if you have an add-on or an extra that your teacher has given you, the kids are going to enjoy it much more. Very, very strict on making sure this is extensive reading. So it's not below their level, but it's easy enough for them that they can read it cover to cover. I want them to enjoy the language. I want them to experience the language. I want them to read it in a natural way. For example, I read my first book in Spanish when I was 25. These kids are doing it at 8 years old, which I wish I could do. And then it's entirely student controlled. They take the control of everything that happens in class. They take control of the activities. They take control of whatever they do, whatever they read, how much they read, and when they give it back to me, as long as I'm making it personal for every one of them. And then there's much more gamified and revision exercises that has worked very well for all of them. Find it very easy to revise what's in the syllabus through these books, and then they just do it and they don't realize they're doing grammar activities. How good's that? So some useful resources for others who may want to do this with higher levels. You guys can check this out because DLT Ireland have the slides. I just want to point out standard ebooks and the Gutenberg project are really good for I give my B2 and above classes homework over Easter for they can get copyright free, legally free books, ebooks, and just download and read them. Nothing improves your English like a good book does anyway, says the storytelling English teacher. And World Storytelling Cafe, if people actually want to see storytellers or storytelling, including myself telling fairy stories around Ireland. And there we go. That is book clubs and how fantastic they are with young learners. I highly recommend them to everyone. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alan, for this very thorough explanation and talk. We have some questions from the audience. So the first one is actually, it will be my personal question, but somebody read my mind and wrote it before. So did students get any input in the choice of book?
After the first book, yes, I introduced Tom Sawyer first because I wanted to give them an adventure book, because when you're 8 years old, I would want an adventure book. And they also happen to like it, boys and girls. There's been no negative feedback from any of the class. After we finish Tom Sawyer, I bring them a selection of books individually that they can all have a look at and read. And then everybody takes a vote on what they read next. Which has been very good, although you have to keep the book, you have to be very careful with the books to keep them in plastic folders and keep them clean for COVID reasons. But as long as you do that, okay.
Perfect, brilliant. And have you seen any improvement in different skills because of reading, perhaps vocabulary?
Definitely vocabulary. I've seen them use higher level grammar structures without them realizing it. Especially from, I mean, they're young learners and supposed to be doing things like mover exams and stuff. They do listen to the CDs that have come with the books. And I've had a few students struggle with pronunciation, and suddenly their sentence structure is so much better. A lot of my students are Italian minute, and their sentence structure has improved massively. So it's all thanks to Injun Joe and his Huck Finn friends, which kicked it all off.
Fantastic. I think we have time for one more question. So did you get students to generate other types of content? For instance, getting them to create tasks for books or chapters or the characters?
So what I do is I get them retelling the story from different perspectives, because they can come up with absolutely worldly different from what's going on. One of the examples I gave was in Tom Sawyer's 50. What sort of life situation is he in now? Other ones is retell the story from different perspectives. So even retell the story from the fence, or the fence's perspective that Tom Sawyer paints at the start of the book. So you're retelling the story from a fence. Or the paintbrush. So inanimate objects can be quite funny and entertaining, because they come off with, they're kids, they come off with unbelievably weird stories. One of my personal favorites is somebody retold the story from the perspective of the wind that was pushing Huck Finn's life raft. I didn't even know they knew that vocabulary, but there you go.